In the vast, endless expanse of the Pacific Ocean, the sky was a deep, foreboding blue, mirroring the troubled waters below. On board the ship, the men were jubilant, their laughter carrying on the salty breeze. But the captain, Ferdinand Magellan, stood alone on the deck, his eyes fixed on the horizon. He was a man who had seen the world, or at least he thought he had. But nothing could have prepared him for what was about to happen. 3 years earlier, Magellan and his crew had set sail from Spain with a dream to find a westward route to the Spice Islands. Their journey had been fraught with peril, from mutinies to storms that seemed to come out of nowhere. But they had persevered, driven by a mix of greed, curiosity, and the promise of glory. Now, as they anchored off the shores of a small island in the Philippines, they were on the verge of something monumental. Little did they know, their arrival would change the course of history, but not in the way they had imagined. The island of Limasawa was a lush, tropical paradise, with dense forests and friendly natives. When Magellan's ship arrived, the locals greeted them with cheers and curious glances. But it was the sight of Magellan's servant, Enrique, surrounded by the natives that truly caught everyone's attention. Enrique, who had been born in the Visayas but sold into slavery in Sumatra, was now speaking his native tongue for the first time in years. The significance of this moment was not lost on Magellan. It meant that they had sailed all the way around the world and returned to where they had begun. For Magellan, this was a moment of triumph. He had proven that the Earth was indeed a sphere, and he had done it by leading a small fleet of ships across uncharted waters. But for his crew, the triumph was of a different kind. They were young men, mostly in their 20s, who had been at sea for over 2 years. They were tired, hungry, and most importantly, they hadn't seen a woman in 5 seasons. The sight of the bare-breasted, friendly natives was like a dream come true. As the days passed, the men of Magellan's fleet began to explore the island. They traded mirrors, scissors, and other trinkets for food and water. But the real prize was the company of the native women. The Filipino girls, who were used to living in a culture where nudity was not a sin, found the white sailors exotic and exciting. The sailors, on the other hand, were driven by a mix of lust and the thrill of the forbidden. They baptized the girls before making love to them, a desecration of the holy rite that only made the act more sinful in their eyes. The sexual tension between the sailors and the natives was palpable. It was a volatile mix of desire, pride, and cultural misunderstanding. The Filipino men, who had welcomed the strangers with open arms, were now feeling humiliated and betrayed. Their sisters, daughters, and wives were being used by these foreigners, and it was a blow to their honor. The situation was ripe for conflict, and it didn't take long for the tensions to boil over. On April 7th, Magellan decided to move the fleet to the larger island of Cebu. Cebu was a strategic location, and Magellan believed that it could serve as a base for further exploration and trade. But the move also brought the sailors into closer contact with the Filipino men, who were now seething with anger. The sailors, still in a state of euphoria, continued their debauchery, unaware of the danger they were in. Magellan, who had always been a strict and disciplined commander, seemed strangely passive. He had given orders to his men to behave, but he did not enforce them. The fleet chaplain, Pedro de Valderrama, tried to intervene, denouncing the sexual acts as mortal sins, but his words fell on deaf ears. The sailors, driven by their baser instincts, continued to act on their desires, oblivious to the growing resentment among the natives. The turning point came when some of the sailors began to raid the harems of the Filipino men. This was the last straw. The Filipinos, who had shown nothing but hospitality, now saw the sailors as invaders. They began to organize, planning to take action against the foreigners who had disgraced their women. The sailors, for their part, were too drunk and too distracted to see the danger that was coming. On April 27, 1521, Magellan led a small group of men to the island of Mactan, just off the coast of Cebu. He had been invited by the local chief, Humaban, to help in a dispute with a neighboring tribe. Magellan, always the adventurer, saw this as an opportunity to show his might and gain more allies. But the invitation was a trap. As Magellan and his men landed on the beach, they were met by a large group of Filipino warriors, armed and ready for battle. The Battle of Mactan was a disaster for Magellan and his men. The Filipinos, who had been preparing for this moment, fought with a ferocity that the sailors had not anticipated. Magellan, despite his bravery, was killed in the fight. His death marked the end of his great voyage, but it also marked the beginning of a new era in the Philippines. The natives, who had been humiliated and disrespected, had taken a stand and won. For the sailors who survived, the aftermath of the battle was a sobering experience. They were forced to leave Cebu, their dreams of glory and riches fading into the distance. They had achieved something incredible by circumnavigating the world, but at what cost? The journey that had started with such high hopes had ended in tragedy, and the lessons they had learned were harsh and unforgettable. In the end, Magellan's voyage was a testament to human curiosity and determination. It proved that the Earth was a sphere, and that it was possible to sail around it. But it also showed the dangers of cultural arrogance, and the consequences of treating others with disrespect. The sailors had seen the world, but they had not truly understood it. They had learned that exploration, while exciting, comes with a heavy price, and that the most important journey is often the one we take within ourselves. As the remaining ships of Magellan's fleet set sail for Spain, the survivors carried with them the memory of their captain and the lessons of their journey. They had been part of something great, but they had also been part of something tragic. The world they had discovered was vast and beautiful, but it was also complex and demanding. The legacy of Magellan and his men would live on, but it would be a legacy of both triumph and caution.